Another one up over here hanging out. See how this guy reacts. Starting out okay. Starting out okay. It's following. Liked it a little faster, so I might keep it coming. There he bit. There he bit. Well, welcome back. Today we are out. It's basically summer. You know, we're into the summertime patterns, and we're gonna talk through. Whoa, this guy got kind of. Whoa, this guy got kind of lassoed. Got spun around. Actually, I'll show it off right here. There we go, on that tungsten stand-up jig and a crawler. Like I was saying, it's kind of summertime patterns right now. That one would eat. Kind of summertime patterns right now. And basically what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna talk through a bunch of summertime walleye tips and tricks. And starting with that first one, as you can see, I was just kind of milling around these weeds. Weeds can be king in the summertime on almost any lake, and for good reason, because these fish have pretty much everything that they need. They have oxygen, they have shade, they have an abundance of food. Obviously there's all sorts of food with these bait fish or whatever milling around in those weeds. And now sometimes it can be a little difficult to dissect the weeds, but on almost any body of water, when there's some decent, like taller, kind of scattered green cabbage, coontail, some of those good green weeds, there's likely going to be fish around. And so, you know, one of my big tips is, if all else fails, go to the weeds. You're gonna find fish. Obviously you're gonna catch fish of other species as well, which can be kind of fun. But the walleyes love the weeds anytime once it gets to be kind of that even mid-June and beyond. And if you're not a forward-facing sonar user, obviously I'm kind of going over tops of these weeds, looking inside of them. If you're not a forward-facing sonar user, one of the things that I used to love to do when I was guiding, when I was just fun fishing, before I had forward-facing sonar, I would burn the weeds. So that's another tip, is to use a spinner, use a Lindy rig, and go fast over tops of these weeds. And I say that burn the weeds, sometimes I'm talking like up to 2 miles an hour. We're using your trolling motor and you're just letting that, basically nicking the tops of the weeds. And you're doing kind of the same thing here. I'm able to do it a little more meticulously and kind of target more specific individual fish. But being able to kind of burn the tops of those weeds and just cruise over top, you're gonna pull some of those walleyes out. One thing is, obviously you're gonna deal with some perch, some panfish, some of that kind of stuff. So you might wanna switch to like an artificial crawler. But more often than not, if you can kind of burn the crawlers, burn a leech over tops of those weeds, you're gonna pull out some of those walleyes. And honestly, has been some of my best days before I had forward-facing sonar. So tip number one, get in the weeds for summertime walleyes. And tip number two, that is going to be, don't be afraid to come back to fish. You know, there's some fish that I saw early in the day that weren't really bitey. They weren't biting yet. But I'm gonna come back to those fish, because one thing when I was guiding, obviously you were forced to be out pretty much all day because you would have trips one after another, all day trips. And so I wasn't fishing just the morning or just the evening. And it's very interesting. I can be on a pot of fish right away in kind of that prime bite window early in the morning and not getting bit. And then all of a sudden I come back midday and those fish can be fired up. So just because you see fish that aren't bitey, don't be afraid to circle back around to those fish a little bit later in the day and come back and see if they are ready to bite. Another thing is, when I am working through these weeds, there's a number of presentations, but when I'm using forward-facing sonar, there's two presentations that I really like to use. One is jig and crawler, being able to cast and kind of work that bait slowly in front of those fish. Sometimes they'll go down to even a 1/16, but a lot of times I'm working a 1/8. And then obviously one of my favorite presentations is using a slip bobber. And if you're looking for like a little more in-depth video on what kind of weeds I'm looking for, I'll post a link down below of a video where I go through like how to find the right types of weeds holding walleyes. And one thing I will say about fishing the weeds for walleyes is it's nice because you can get some eaters like that, but you can also get some very big fish. You know, typically when I'm seeing big fish in the weeds, they're either kind of mixed in some of the sparse stuff, just kind of swimming around, or they are on top. Even today I saw some big fish that were over top of some of this really thick weeds. So you can find bigs mixed in or on top. And then what I see is a lot of times I'll find eaters more off the edge. They'll be in kind of like schools off the kind of weed edge, and you can kind of pick off a few of those. Today, these fish are a little more scattered from what I'm seeing. Like even that one, that was just a single sitting there. It wasn't in a pod, wasn't in a group. So they're definitely a little more scattered than what I anticipated for this time of year, but we're just getting into the start of kind of those summertime patterns. So we're gonna keep fishing, catch another fish, and then we'll talk through some more tips. Something decent milling in the weeds over there. Oh, like that. Like that. Come on. This one's decent. Yep, it bit. It bit and it's good. It bit and it's good. It's a good fish. It's a good fish. Oh, yes. Come on. This one's a good fish. This one's a good fish. You can see that just a bigger mark hanging out over tops of those weeds. Tough to tell how truly big, but it looked pretty solid. My guess is 25 plus if I had to guess, but I've mostly been seeing a lot of eaters and smaller, but it looks like a good one. Oh yeah, that's a good fish. That's a good fish. You bet. Sweet. That is a solid fish. Like I was saying earlier, you know, you can just mill around these weeds, and you can see that one was kind of hanging out a little bit mixed in. You saw a little thicker mark hanging, like you had those vertical lines to the weeds, and this one was hanging down below. I'm gonna get it off, show it off. Oh, popping around the bump board quick. We got 26 inches, nice belly on that guy. Ah, what an awesome fish. We'll get that one back. Again, like I said, that's why I love working these weeds, is you can just get into some very good quality fish mixed in with the eaters. But that's gonna lead us to our next tip. The next tip is going to be talking specifically about your profile, your size. You know, as the summer progresses, so does that bait. That bait gets bigger. You know, a lot of our fisheries are very heavily invested into like perch. There's a ton of perch for the main forage base. And so as those perch are getting larger, a lot of times, especially for those bigger fish, you want to upsize those baits. Now, don't get me wrong, doing what I'm doing today and going finesse in a crawler, that's gonna work all year. But there are times where that bite can kind of get a little tougher. And then I upsize to, again, more of those paddle tails, more of those larger plastics, reaction baits, something that's a little bit bigger to match kind of that same profile as a lot of these perch that we're seeing. And so don't be afraid to upsize your bait. And another thing, this kind of goes by the wayside, and I am guilty of it, but one of my buddies, his name is Bob, I fish some tournaments with him, just an awesome angler, awesome dude. One of the things that he always has with him is minnows. You know, as it gets to be later in the year, people give up on the minnows, myself included, and crawlers and leeches are the main thing. But there have been times, I remember one time I fished league with Bob and nothing was going, and he brought out some minnows, and we caught some of the only fish in league that night, and no one else was using minnows. So that's something I learned from him, especially midsummer when everyone else and everything else switches to crawlers or leeches. Don't give up on that minnow bite, because that can be a bite that triggers some of those fish, even when everything else doesn't. Again, it can be tough to keep them alive. So having a bait tank, having something like that, but if you're looking to get, especially if you're like fishing tournaments or just really wanting to maximize your time out on the water, don't neglect using those minnows. Have everything along if you can. Easier said than done sometimes, especially with the cost of bait, but don't be afraid to utilize those minnows. We're gonna keep fishing, bring you back the next tips. Something. Bit, not giant. Not giant. Decent though. Actually it's okay. Just milling around in these weeds. Just looking for those marks that are sitting out on top. Went out to some structure for a while. Wasn't really doing, so I kind of came back into the weeds here. Come on. Don't pop off like the last decent one. Well, this one isn't as big as that last one. Come on, buddy. Still decent. He is not wanting to give up. Sheesh. Sheesh. It's actually an okay fish. Man, these ones just sitting on top of the weeds. Oh, they're fun when they bite, but they can be some of the bigger, smarter fish too. I switched it up to a little more metallic jig just to see if that'll make a difference. There we go. We have another decent fish. And so the next tip, or what I had planned for the next tip, was to go find some fish out on some Midlake Structure. And I tried that for a little bit and it was not happening. But that's still gonna be my next tip because that's going to be happening. It might just be a touch early for that right now, at least on this lake, because I have been seeing fish on Midlake Structure on other lakes. But when all else fails, and honestly, sometimes just your best percentage is to go to Midlake Structure, especially as the summer progresses. And when I'm looking for Midlake Structure, typically for me, it's humps that are in that 20 to 30 foot, like where they top out. And you know, once you get around and once you find some fish, you can either use a forward-facing sonar and kind of sharpshoot with like jig and crawler, jig and plastic, jig and minnow, slip bobbers, or reaction baits. Those are great things to do while you're targeting some of that Midlake Structure. However, another kind of mini tip was don't get stuck on one bite. You know, I was gonna go out and target Midlake Structure and it was just not going. I wasn't seeing many fish. The fish that I were seeing was were not very aggressive. So don't get stuck on a specific bite either, because it's really easy to get locked into one thing and beat it to death without getting bit. So I came back to the weeds here and found a few more active fish. And kind of going right along with that is get fish to react. You know, especially as the summer progresses, sometimes these fish can get a little finicky. And the only way that you can get bit is to throw like a puppet minnow or some sort of reaction bait, jig and plastic, where you're snapping it a little bit more. So don't be afraid to throw out some of those bigger baits, throw out some of those more aggressive baits, and get fish to react versus working that kind of finesse. So we're gonna keep working through some of these weeds, try to catch one more big fish, bring the last couple tips before we have to leave for the day. I kind of like that one sitting in the weeds a little bit more. Ooh, sees it, sees it. Come on, this guy's gonna do it. This guy's gonna do it, come on. Come on. Oh, he looked like it was gonna do it. Another one up here does not look as big. Not look as big, see if it's bitey. Oh boy, looks bitey. Yep, it looks bitey. Why couldn't that bigger one done that? Decent fish. Probably more of an eater. I'm gonna net him just to be safe. Oh. Yeah, just had to stick to the game plan today. Stick to the weeds. These weeds all summer long are gonna hold fish. I'll just show that one right there, more of an eater. Wish that bigger one would have acted like that. We're not gonna net on that fish though. We're gonna try to find a bigger one. See if we, oh, guy's interested. Yep, he bit. Oh, he spit it. That was painful. Those big fish do that a lot where they give one little nip at it. Sometimes it pays to just give it beans right away. Sometimes it pays to let it eat. Obviously that time, probably since it didn't end up biting, would have been worth it to chance it and see if it was there. Shoot, 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 shoot. That time I didn't give it a second. That time I didn't give it a second to rethink. That time, after that last one, spit it. Ooh, this one's feeling decent. Not a giant, but still a decent fish. Oh yeah, it's a feisty little guy. Not the ones we're up here for, but man, catching fish like this, I am not gonna complain. Jeez, this guy is feisty. Come on. Come on. Another decent one. Another one right in that like 24, 25-ish range. I might have to rename this video Weed Walleyes, because that is definitely what we're doing right here. And so you can just see, you know, a lot of these weeds are topping out from 5 to 10 feet or so below the surface. And so it's kind of one of those things, if you can find a large area that's either slow tapering or just a nice flat like that, where these weeds are not right to the surface, you can kind of comb through those pretty quickly. Depending on the area, sometimes if they're like really sitting in the weeds, you're gonna have to go a little slower. But if they're like sitting on top, like some of these are, you can cover an area pretty good and be able to pick out some of these walleyes in the weeds. It's coming out of there. Come on. Yep. I gave her the beans right away again. Didn't want to give it a chance to drop it. Oh, I think this is a good one. I think this is a good one. I don't know if it's the one we've been waiting for or not, but I think it's a good one. Oh, so tough because so many of these weed fish just fight so good. They're shallow, they don't have a lot of room to play. Whoa. Awesome. Awesome fish. No, let's not lose it here. No, let's not lose it here. Oh yeah, that's a solid fish. Oh my gosh. Whew, there we go. This might be the one we ended on here. Well, not quite as big as I was thinking right out of the gates, but it's got a thick head on it. I think it was a touch over 26. It's got a little bit of a wonky tail. Well, apparently my mic died. I don't know at what point. And so I'm gonna talk through quickly my setup, because if I don't, someone's gonna be upset. And then I'll give my last tip before I finish up. And so, like I talked about, that was on the tungsten stand-up long shank jig from Norfin. This one is the metallic color. Honestly, a little bit of props to Nick Lindner. When we were doing our uncut, he talked about that a little bit, liking to use these for crawlers, and I do as well. You know, I started using it a little bit more. It's got a nice strong hook. It's got a good hook keeper, and you can still let it drop all the way to bottom and let it be standing up. So like that one, this one's on, if you've watched any of my like jig crawler videos, you know, I like an upper 6s to even up to 7.5 foot medium light rod. This one is a 7 foot medium light extra fast from Trika. I've been using these rods a little bit. Very sensitive, very nice, very light. And that is paired with the Piscifun Carbon XT 2000, typically like a 2000 size reel for a lot of this kind of stuff. 8-pound Daiwa X braid with an 8-pound fluoro leader. It's a pretty long one, and that's tied with an FG knot. So that is the setup. And moving on to the last tip, we have, do not neglect midday. You can see it's like noon right now. Fish are biting. I'm fishing shallow, like less than 15 feet of water. Some of these are in 6-8 feet of water, and they're still biting. So do not neglect midday. When I was guiding, you know, you're forced to fish all times of the day, and you quickly realize that sometimes that midday bite is the best bite. And so if you've never tried it, if you just go out early and late, sleep in one day, give it a shot. Especially there's certain lakes that definitely fish better midday than even earlier late. So that's my last tip. I do have a little bit more time, so I'm gonna try to stick one more big one. If I do, you'll see that right here. If not, thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.